parents who step in to raise children who would otherwise be taken into care. And a group of women are planning legal action against Johnson Johnson over alleged links between talcum powder and cancer. And we're going to bring you a bit more on this story now, because I'm sure lots of you has used talc before, maybe your parents used it on you before that. So this might come as a bit of a shock to hear that it can allegedly cause some types of cancer. Let me try and explain this for you before we speak to some of our guests tonight. Now, talc is a naturally occurring mineral which is mined and then crushed into the powder that we use. But it's often found near asbestos, which is also naturally occurring mineral, so it's possible for the talc to become cross-contaminated. And there's evidence to show that long-term use of talc can cause things like mesothelioma, which is an asbestos-related cancer, ovarian cancer, fallopian tube cancer and peritoneal cancer, which affects the abdomen. Now, Johnson Johnson, who were a huge producer of talc, have been accused of hiding the risk to the public. They deny that, along with denying the cancer risk. But thousands of people have already taken legal action against them in the United States. And now, as we said, a group of women here in the UK are doing the same thing. Now, I'm joined by Tom Longstaff, who's a lawyer from the firm taking that action, and Cassandra Wardle, who believes that her cancer is linked to talc. Thank you to both of you for coming in. Cassandra, we should say that, when we hear you talk about this, we can hear that it has affected your voice, the cancer. So we'll try our best to listen as carefully as we can. Yeah. Can you give us an idea of the other impacts that this has had on you?
It's been astronomical, the impact to my life. So in December 2021, I had to undertake a huge risky surgery to remove the cancer. And had to sign away that I would probably have to have a stoma, potential loss of bladder. Thankfully that didn't happen, but after a 7-hour operation, I am now left with lots of issues, such as things like bowel incontinence, lots of bowel issues. It's triggered asthma, the chemo triggered asthma, the chemo triggered a rare autoimmune inflammatory disease called sarcoidosis. Throughout chemo, I was exceptionally ill and had tonsillitis through chemo and beyond. I managed to fight it off eventually, but then it came back and it's taken my voice. At some point in the future, my voice will come back, but it's been 9 months so far. The impact on my life has affected everything. I haven't had a proper conversation with my dad in 9 months. My dad's in his 70s, pot deaf.
So he can't hear you?
He can't hear me. It's affected my income. My employer let me go when I lost my voice because people can't hear me to do my job. It's affected me physically. I can't socialise properly. People can't hear me in a bar or restaurant. They can't talk to me. Everything in my life has been affected by the cancer, chemo, treatment and beyond. So I now live with long-term health conditions as a result of this.
We'll come back to you in a moment, Cassandra, but I think having Tom here is really helpful because, Tom, we mentioned those cases in the US. I think it's around about 62,000 people who've taken action, and at least $13 billion has been either laid aside or paid out, in this case, over there. So what have you done from a UK perspective so far, and what's the next step?
At KP Law, we currently act on behalf of around 2,000 claimants who've all used Johnson's baby powder and have been diagnosed with one of the types of cancer that you outlined at the very start. This is the first time the claim has been brought in the UK. We are in the process of starting to issue claims in an English court, but we've already seen quite a bit of litigation already in America, and Johnson Johnson facing around 65,000 claims, having to pay compensation to those victims.
And Cassandra, to come back to you, because I'm aware that there's probably quite a few people watching this who may have been through the same sort of things that you've been through. Your family used talcum powder on you when you were a kid, and you continue to use that through your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a number of facets here. Firstly, if you think that you've been affected, I would encourage you to sign up and join the claim. If you are undertaking diagnosis, don't hesitate. Go to your GP if you have any of the signs of ovarian cancer or any one of the other cancers it could have affected.
And Tom, how big a challenge is it legally to take on a firm the size of Johnson Johnson? Because they, if you walk down a supermarket aisle, they have their fingers in all sorts of pies, don't they?
They do. They're a very high value and powerful organisation. The claim essentially has two parts. Firstly, the presence of the asbestos in the talcum powder and the association with those 4 types of cancer. Johnson Johnson, to some extent in the US, have continued to defend the claims, and it remains to be seen what approach they will take in the UK.
Can I read you a bit of a statement that we've approached them, and they said, they take the issue of talc safety incredibly seriously, and they always have. These findings uniformly show the absence of asbestos contamination in Johnson's baby powder and the talc sourced by Johnson's baby powder. Independent science, they say, makes clear that talc is not associated with the risk of ovarian cancer nor mesothelioma, which is one of those conditions we were talking about. They say that there's been a false narrative, particularly in the US. That narrative defies logic, rewrites history and ignores the facts. Is that the sort of statement that you have come up against at every stage?
Indeed, and the false narrative is in fact peddled by Johnson Johnson. So we have seen documents from the 1970s where Johnson Johnson were informed of a potential issue, and instead of disclosing the risk to consumers and allowing them to make their own decision as to whether they use the product, they continued to sell the product for decades, which has been tested and has been found to contain asbestos. It's worth highlighting as well, the World Health Organization have recently declared talcum powder to be carcinogenic to humans.
And Cassandra, from your perspective, you mentioned that you were using talcum powder for a lot of your life. Yeah. When did you first hear about this, and at what stage did you begin to become worried and concerned?
So it was after I'd had my surgery, and it was just before I was due to start chemo. I saw the news articles coming out from America at the time, and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. But at the time, I felt I was fighting for my life. I had to deal with going through a grueling chemo regime, so I shelved it, and then I've kept watch on it since. So that's where I first became aware of it.
And when you hear about, Tom was mentioning the other people who are a part of this action as well. When you hear about other people who are in the same situation as you, does that give you strength? Does that give you hope?
What I would say is I'm part of a support group around ovarian cancer, and we support each other very closely. We try not to deal with the talc thing, that's for the lawyers. We just support each other on the issues, not only living with ovarian cancer, getting diagnosis, but also living beyond, because it's very challenging with what you're left with.
We should say that while we've been talking to Tom and Cassandra, we showed you some pictures, and actually the pictures were of baby powder, which is different to talc, which is a new formula, which is not what we're talking about here. And Tom, we talked to you about those the next steps. Do you think this is going to continue to grow as people watch interviews with Cassandra and some of the other people?
We think there are a very high number of claimants affected in the UK by this problem. Not only people who've used talc themselves and have developed cancer, but also the relatives of people who have passed away, used talc in their lifetime and did develop one of those types of cancer. It's worth highlighting, in fact, Johnson Johnson around 2 years ago switched to a cornstarch-based product. There is no association with asbestos and cancer from the use of that product. This relates to the use of mineral-based talcum powder, which, as you highlighted at the very start, is found naturally and very close to asbestos.
Okay, Tom, appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Cassandra. Really good to talk to you. And you were saying that hopefully your voice will come back.
It will come back. It's been 9 months so far. So, yeah, fingers crossed it happens soon.
Thank you. It's good to have you on the programme.
All right, thank you.
For your time. We are here until just before 6 o'clock tonight. A couple of real treats coming up for you after the break.
And then I heard a voice.